Well, friends, welcome again to the Good News Course. Now, last week, if you remember, we started on the horns of a dilemma. Because we're all rebels, we all have a love-hate relationship with justice. This session, as we really start to get to the heart of what Christianity is all about, we have a dilemma that God is going to solve. Because in a way, you see, God has a love-hate relationship with justice as well. On the one hand, because God is a loving God, He doesn't want injustice to last forever. There will be a judgment day where justice is going to be restored. But on the other hand, also because God is a loving God, He doesn't want to punish us. He doesn't want us to have to pay for our sins. He wants to be merciful. So there's a very important dilemma at the heart of the Christian message, not just for us, but for God as well. How can God be both just and merciful? How can God punish sin while letting sinners go free? Well, that's exactly why God sent Jesus into the world. You might know the most famous thing about Jesus is that He died on a cross. Sometimes Christians put crosses around their necks. We put them up all over church buildings. The cross is what we're all about. And yet it's a weird symbol when you think about it. Why are we embracing and celebrating what was a method of execution? Crosses like the electric chair or the guillotine or the gallows, only far more gruesome. So why do Christians want to remember and celebrate such a terrible, disgusting event? And tell people about the time that our hero Jesus was gruesomely executed? Well, it's not just that we feel sympathy for Jesus, though that's certainly true, but lots of criminals in the Roman world died on crosses. There were two criminals who died either side of Jesus. But there's something unique about Jesus' death that makes it worth remembering and actually worth celebrating. Because you see, the cross is how God solves His dilemma. Listen to how the Apostle Paul puts it in his letter to the Romans, chapter 3. He says, God put forward Jesus as a propitiation by His blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness because in His divine forbearance, He had passed over former sins. It was to show His righteousness at the present time, so that He might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. You see what Paul is saying? There's a lot packed into that little sentence, but what's the essence of it? God is determined to be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. So He's not going to let sins go unpunished. That would be unjust. But He does want to let sinners go unpunished. That's what justification is all about. That's what justification achieves. By His blood means through Jesus' violent death. So through Jesus' violent death, God has made a way for sinners to be justified, declared righteous. It's just as if I'd never sinned. So now I don't have to be punished. That's what the cross is all about. But how did it all work then? Let's head back to Luke's Gospel to find out. The first thing Luke wants us to know is that the cross was not an accident. It was all part of God's plan. Jesus went willingly, intentionally to His own death to save us. It's not as if Jesus was just going about His business one day, trying to be a good teacher, and then His enemies got the better of Him. No, the cross wasn't an accident or a failure or even a hiccup in God's plan. It's actually the centerpiece of the plan. This is how God shows His love for us. In chapter 9 on page 35, if you've got an Essential Jesus, we start our journey towards the cross. About halfway down the page, Luke tells us, when the time was drawing near for Jesus to be taken up, that is, lifted up on the cross, He set Himself to go to Jerusalem. You see that up until now, Jesus has been preaching and healing publicly. He's been walking around Galilee, demonstrating His supernatural authority over sicknesses and storms, spirits, and so on. But now He determines to go to Jerusalem. That moment there marks a turning point in Luke's Gospel. And Jesus knows exactly what is going to happen to Him in Jerusalem. Flip forward a few pages to page 47. Now we're in Luke chapter 13. About 2/3 of the way down the page, Jesus says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to her. Let's keep going. Head over to chapter 18, page 57, about halfway down the page. Jesus took the 12 aside and said to them, "Look, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he will be handed over to people from other nations, and be ridiculed and insulted and spat upon. They will flog him, then kill him, and on the third day he will be raised to life." You see what's happening then? Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, deliberately going to his death. The cross was not an accident, it was all part of God's plan. This is how God determined to deal with his dilemma. In his love, God sent his Son into the world, the man Jesus Christ. And God didn't just send his Son into the world, he sent him to the cross. So there's one last passage I want us to look at in this session, and it's from Luke chapter 23, page 70. Before Jesus died, he was put on trial by Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor in Jerusalem. Once again, Luke has carefully recorded the details of this event so that we can know with certainty what Jesus' death was all about. Pick it up at the top of the page. Pilate called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought this man to me as one who was perverting the people. I interrogated him in your presence, but found no basis for any of your accusations against him. Moreover, neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. It seems obvious that he has done nothing deserving death. Therefore, I will order a flogging and then release him." The first thing Luke stresses as he tells us this account is that Jesus died an innocent man. Several times in the chapter we hear different people tell us that Jesus was innocent or that Jesus had done nothing wrong and so on. And of course, in the first place, what they mean is that Jesus had done nothing criminal, so he didn't deserve to be crucified according to Roman law. But actually what Luke wants us to know is far more significant than that. Luke wants us to know that Jesus, in fact, had lived a perfectly innocent life. Now, I know it's hard to imagine, isn't it? But that's what makes Jesus so unique. Jesus was the only perfectly righteous man who has ever lived. He never said the wrong thing. He never did the wrong thing. He never even thought wrong things or felt wrong, inappropriate feelings. He didn't just flip out or get triggered when things got tough. And he didn't live his life controlled by lust and greed and arrogance and anger. Every moment he lived his life to love and serve others in perfect obedience to God. You see, if I can put it like this, Jesus never left box one. He always lived under God's rule. He never rebelled against God. Even though in his life he was tempted to do the wrong thing, just as we all are, Jesus never gave in to temptation. And of course, because he didn't wander into box two, because Jesus never sinned, he didn't deserve to suffer the punishment of box three. So why did Jesus die? Well, again, let's keep reading in Luke 23 for the answer. Historically speaking, Jesus died because the crowd cried out together, "Take him away! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas was in prison for a rebellion that had occurred in the city and for murder. Pilate wanted to release Jesus, and so he spoke to them again, but they cried out, "Crucify! Crucify him!" A third time, Pilate said to them, "For what? Has he done anything evil? I have found that this man committed no crime deserving of death. Therefore, I will order a flogging and then release him." But the crowd kept demanding with loud voices that he be crucified, and their voices won out. Pilate decided to grant their request. He released the man who had been in prison for rebellion and murder as they requested, and gave Jesus up to what they wanted. My friends, there you have it. Let's have a think about what happens here. You see how Luke is giving us another picture of what Jesus' death was all about. At one level, he died instead of the rebel Barabbas. Luke says Barabbas was a rebel and a murderer. He deserved to die. But Jesus died in his place. But you see, more importantly, we need to know that Jesus died for us. We're the rebels who deserve to die. Jesus is the only truly innocent man who's ever lived. He didn't die for his own sins, but he died for our sins. He died in our place instead of us. He took our punishment. It's a swap, right? Just a simple playground swap. It's a substitution, like you might see in a football game. In the end, Christianity is all about this great swap, this great substitution, this great exchange. The righteous for the unrighteous. Jesus has paid our debt. He has done our time. We get to go free. We're pardoned because Jesus was punished. And this is how God has solved his dilemma. This is what the plan was. This is why Jesus came. So that sin might still be punished, justice can still be done, and sinners like you and me can go free.